forward. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Davis. Some more students will be rolling in, but this is definitely a great topic. This is one of the more interesting topics that gets me excited. It captures quite a bit of what was going on in the late 20th century in the United States. So without prolonging it too much, why don't you just jump right into it and see what's going on with the power of the gun, the Black Panther Party for self-defense. Hey, puppy.
All right. Well, thank you, Professor Kennedy, and thanks for joining us, you guys. I'll just dive right in here. I'm going to talk about what I think is a very interesting as well as a topic that's very much tied to current events, as I hope you'll see as we get going. A couple things. If you have any questions, I'll try to watch the chat messages a little bit as we're going. Try to kind of address those some. I'm going to throw a lot of information out here. Don't feel like you have to take notes or anything like that. We will be posting a recording of this if you want to go back and listen to some, or if you are taking notes and frustrated, but you won't be tested on this or anything. So anyway, our topic tonight is the history of the Black Panther Party for self-defense. As you see there, and matter of fact, this picture, I don't know if you can see my cursor scrolling. I'll quit grabbing it. This picture here on the page is taken 1 month after the famous Black Panther Party was formed. We'll get to all the details on that here in just a minute. But see, 6 guys here. These are the 6 original members of the Black Panthers in the picture. We'll talk a whole lot about 3 of them. Kneeling in the black leather jacket is the first actual person who joined the Black Panthers, little Bobby Hutton, who was 16 at the time. And then standing on the far right is a native Texan, like many of us, but who ended up in Oakland, California, Bobby Seale, who was the chairman of the Black Panther Party. And then probably the most significant person in the picture, one of the most probably influential thinkers of the Black Power movement in the 1960s, is the guy who is second from the left, standing in a black shirt, and that is Huey P. Newton. So tonight I want to talk about the Black Panther Party for self-defense. The Black Panthers are founded in the mid-1960s, in 1966 to be specific. And just to kind of set the stage with what's going on in the 1960s in the United States with the civil rights movement and all that, the mid-60s was a great time for the civil rights movement. It had achieved 2 very significant victories that we often think have pretty much solved the problems of civil rights, although we want to get a little deeper than that tonight. First of all, the Civil Rights Act in 1964 was passed. The Civil Rights Act banned racial segregation, the Jim Crow system, outlawed all the separate water fountains, separate schools, separate movie theaters, all of that, banned segregation in public places, and it also banned employment discrimination. And then the next year, the Voting Rights Act was passed, and the Voting Rights Act outlawed poll taxes, literacy tests, all the things that were used to keep African Americans from voting in the South, even though, of course, the 15th Amendment said that they should vote. Anyway, the Voting Rights Act in 1965 restored the right to vote for African Americans in the South. So it was a good time. The major victories, as you see in the picture there, is Martin Luther King shaking President Lyndon Johnson, another native Texan, shaking his hand after Johnson signed the historic Civil Rights Act that both of them had fought to get. King had fought for decades to get. So anyway, things look good, but below the surface, not everything was so great. The civil rights movement and both of those laws, as historic as they were, really only benefited African Americans in the South. They're the ones that faced the legal segregation. There was segregation in the big cities in the North and West, but it was de facto facto segregation, not in the law. And so that didn't really help them. They might be helped a little by the Civil Rights Act, but at least in terms of employment discrimination, but they already had the right to vote. And so what was going on is that in the big urban cities of the North and the West, there was still a lot of lingering discontent. African Americans faced poor housing, limited employment and education opportunities, inadequate health care, and police brutality. And we saw that this discontent, this kind of mix of rising expectations and discontent, blew up into major urban riots in the 1960s. Harlem in 1964, this picture's from Watts in 1965, Detroit and Newark in 1967, all witnessed major riots. So something was afoot, and what we see is something that we would call the Black Power movement begin to emerge. Sorry, learn to work the controls here. And actually a new leader will emerge as kind of part of this movement, kind of separately at first, but Malcolm X, I'm sure you've heard of Malcolm X. Malcolm X was a minister for the Nation of Islam. This was an American sect of Islam that was really shaped by the realities of the black experience in America. People of the Muslim faith in other parts of the world would not actually consider the Nation of Islam to actually officially be part of the Muslim religion, but we know them here as the Black Muslims. And Malcolm X has a very famous story. We could do a whole talk on him right here. I don't want to go too much into it, but Malcolm X, of course, was born in a rough situation. His father was a preacher, outspoken leader in the black community, probably lynched by white vigilantes. And so Malcolm X had a rough youth, ended up in prison. But the Nation of Islam did a lot of ministry in prisons, and that's where Malcolm X became educated, converted to the Nation of Islam, and taught himself to read, and eventually went to work as a minister for the nation when he got out of jail. Nation of Islam taught black pride and self-reliance. They emphasized discipline and self-respect, and they were supporters of black nationalism. In a lot of ways, they were what we would call black separatists. They wanted, not like Martin Luther King, who wanted to integrate in the United States for African Americans. The Nation of Islam wanted to separate. They denounced whites as evil, and they rejected the goals of the civil rights movement and racial integration. Their leader was a guy by the name of Elijah Muhammad, but it was the magnetic personality of their leading minister, Malcolm X, that turned this little sect from Detroit and Chicago into a nationwide movement. So a lot of people kind of lump Malcolm X in with all the other great civil rights leaders, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, but in reality, Malcolm X mocked the peaceful tactics of civil rights leaders. And he called not for nonviolence and passive resistance. He called for self-defense. He called for the black community not to incite violence, but to defend itself. Anyway, Malcolm X becomes so famous that Elijah Muhammad becomes really jealous. Elijah Muhammad is kind of a flawed leader. He has several affairs with young secretaries and fathers illegitimate children. And the Nation of Islam is a very moral group. Malcolm X does not drink or smoke. He lives a very austere life, and he's shocked by the infidelities of Elijah Muhammad. And so anyway, they separate, and Malcolm X leaves the Nation of Islam as he's becoming very famous. Then he famously has a change of heart. He goes, like any good Muslim, he wants to make a pilgrimage to Mecca, the Muslim holy land, holy city. And so he goes there, and what Malcolm X learns while he's in Mecca is that there are all races of Muslims and they work together. And so while he's in Mecca, he rejects racial separatism and instead comes back to the United States looking like he has a goal of organizing, and he begins to communicate with Martin Luther King, and he forms a new organization, the Organization for Afro-American Unity. And by this point, he's really the leader of all these inner city African Americans in the big cities on the West Coast: Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, the Midwest, Chicago, Detroit, and on the East Coast, Washington, D.C., New York City, Boston. Then in 1965, when he's 39 years old, Malcolm X is assassinated by elements probably of the Nation of Islam, the jealousies of Elijah Muhammad. There are rumors, conspiracy theories that maybe the New York police were involved. There's been detailed study of Malcolm X's life, including a great biography a few years ago by Manning Marable, who's the leading historian. And there's no direct evidence the police were involved. Maybe they knew, maybe they looked the other way, but it was really the Nation of Islam who killed Malcolm X and who left, most importantly for our story here, this growing manifestation of the civil rights movement without a leader. The movement will get a name just after Malcolm X's death in 1966. And Stokely Carmichael will be the key figure. Stokely Carmichael comes up with the term Black Power in September of 1966. Stokely Carmichael was a leader of a very important civil rights organization. You may not have heard of them. I should have put the abbreviation for their name because that's how we pronounce it: the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or otherwise known as SNCC. And Stokely Carmichael became the chairperson of SNCC and began to use the term Black Power. In 1966, he also started to be the first person, him and SNCC, to use the image of the Black Panther. Now, as we'll see, the Black Panther Party we're talking about is going to come from different roots, but the term was out there. In Lowndes County, Alabama, SNCC went in to organize voters. In Lowndes County, Alabama in 1966, now this was 1 year after the Voting Rights Act of 1965. In that county in 1966, the population was 80% African American, and not a single African American was registered to vote and did not vote in that election. So SNCC and Stokely Carmichael went into Lowndes County and they formed the Lowndes County Freedom Organization. And they started to try to organize a third party for African Americans that was separate from the all-white Democratic Party of Alabama at that time. While promoting the party, they started to use the Black Panther symbol. And so that's how the name was out there. Actually, by the fall of 1966, Stokely Carmichael and SNCC were encouraging other people around the country to form their own chapters of a new party called the Black Panthers. Now, the guys we're going to start talking about and we're most concerned with here, sorry about that picture, I don't know why it came out like that. They are not connected to SNCC. They are activists in Oakland. That's where the Black Panther Party is founded. And they have heard of Stokely Carmichael and SNCC, and they know about this stuff, but they choose the name Black Panther when they form their party in 1966. But they add a critical little part to the title. They are the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. That was not something that other people had used. And they did that intentionally because they wanted to distinguish their organization from the nonviolent civil rights movement. They wanted to say that they were about African Americans in Oakland defending themselves. The party formed in Oakland, 1966, and we'll talk about the two important leaders there in just a second. They formed following the shooting death of an unarmed black youth by a member of the Oakland police force. Like I said, a lot of this could be ripped out of the headlines today. In September 1966, 16-year-old Matthew Johnson was shot in the back while he was running from the police. It took over an hour for an ambulance to arrive, and Johnson bled to death before they got there. So that was what spurred these two African-American activists, Bobby Seale on the left and Huey Newton, to form their own new organization, the Black Panther Party. In Oakland at this time, there were a little over 660 police officers on the Oakland police force. Only 16 of them were African Americans. And this is where I got the title. As Huey Newton said about their founding, what him and Seale had become convinced was that only with the power of the gun can the black masses halt the terror and brutality perpetrated against them by the armed racist power structure. So these guys were pretty radical guys, and the Black Panthers are one of the most famous and most infamous groups in recent American history. Here's the first issue of what became their very famous newspaper, talking about another police death. If you read the history of Oakland in the mid-'60s, the amount of police violence in the black community is shocking. Anyway, so a little more on the two key founders, two of the major figures of the Black Power movement and really of the 1960s. First, Huey P. Newton. What's interesting, I'm going to talk about three of the most important Panthers here in the next few minutes, and all three of them were born in the South. But all three of them moved with their families during the World War II period for economic opportunities to California. This is, if we go back a little larger African-American history here, if you go back to 1900, most of the African-American population in the U.S. is in the South. But over the course of the 20th century, the 1900s, millions of African Americans, especially during World War I and World War II, leave the South. They leave the segregation, they leave the lynching, they leave the poor schools, they leave the lack of voting. They basically vote with their feet and move to the North around World War I for job opportunities, and then with World War II to the North and to the West. And so all three of the key early Panthers families are from the South. They were born in the South. But during the World War II era for economic opportunity, went to California. Newton came from a political family. His father was a member of the NAACP in Louisiana, and he actually named his son after a very famous politician in Louisiana, Huey P. Long. There's another topic we could go quite a bit into. Very interesting character. There's some YouTube clips. Check him out. But he was a Southern populist. Anyway, a great champion of the people in some ways in Louisiana, also amazingly corrupt, but did a lot for poor people in Louisiana. And so Newton's father named him after Huey P. Long. They moved to Oakland when Huey was 3 years old. He went to Oakland schools. Education in Oakland wasn't really much better than in the South, because when Newton graduated from high school, he's barely literate. But however, he later educated himself and then taught himself to fully read well, became an avid reader, and then enrolled in Oakland's Merritt College, and that's where he met Seale. One thing I really like about talking about this topic here is that Merritt College is the community college in Oakland. And so Professor Kennedy's from the northern, a little further north in California, but he can attest. So anyway, what we're talking about here is community college students just like you guys. And when I'm teaching, my job is to teach you a lot of history. That's always my goal. But I'm also hoping to, I don't know how you teach this, but maybe inspire you to go out and to make history. And, you may think that, oh, wow, I'll never do that or anything. But here we're talking about a couple of community college students who really changed things, shook things up, became iconic leaders. So anyway, he met Bobby Seale at Merritt College. Now, like I said, these guys are rough guys. They are from the inner city ghetto, and in some ways they never escape it. Huey Newton went to jail for burglary while he was a student at Merritt College. So he spent some time in the county jail. I guess, financial aid wasn't as available. But anyway, I'm just kidding. But anyway, these are not honorable, I don't know what to say. They're not completely upstanding. They live very controversial lives. And the way I understand them is that they're a product of the world they come from. Very rough inner city world conditions like we talked about in the 50s and 60s. Anyway, Newton, though, also, like I say, he was an avid reader. He took law classes at San Francisco State College. And he read the law avidly, and he really became an expert on the law. So more about that, because that will be important later. And his title in the Panthers is Minister of Defense. Now, the chairman of the Panthers is the other founding member. This is Bobby Seale. He's a native Texan, again, as I mentioned earlier. Now, I should update that. He lived in Dallas when he was young, but I found out recently he was actually born in Liberty, Texas, a little bit north of Houston. But then his family moved to Dallas, but then during World War II, they relocated to Oakland, the West Coast, because of the war with Japan during World War II, because of massive government spending. U.S. government spent as much as in 4 years during World War II as it had in its previous entire history. That created a financial boom on the West Coast. His family moved to Oakland, where his father and then later he worked as a sheet metal mechanic. Anyway, Seale dropped out of high school. He spent 3 years in the Air Force. He was given a dishonorable discharge, though, for attacking a superior officer. And after 3 years, he was out of the Air Force and back in Oakland working as a sheet metal mechanic. He went to night school to finish high school. And then he enrolled at Merritt when he was 26 years old. So Bobby Seale's a little bit older than most of the early Panthers. Seale and Newton met. Both of them were into politics, and they met at Merritt as part of the Afro-American Association, which was a black student activist group, very popular at universities and colleges at this time. But Newton and Seale became increasingly disillusioned with the organization. They were inspired by Malcolm X, his idea of self-defense. And what they felt like was that the Afro-American Association sat around campus and talked about ideas. They wanted to actually do something about it. And so that's why they broke off and formed their own party. And so what they decided to do initially was to take on the police. Like I said, it was police violence that inspired their organization, and Huey Newton was an expert on the law. And Huey Newton knew two things about California law. First of all, he knew that citizens had the right to observe the police doing their job as long as they stayed. What the law said was a reasonable distance away from the police. Newton also was an expert on California gun law, and at this time, it may be kind of surprising, or maybe it's not today, Californians, it was perfectly legal in California in 1965 to carry a loaded weapon in public as long as you didn't conceal that weapon. So you could carry a loaded rifle, a loaded shotgun. You could carry a pistol in a holster on your waist. Now you couldn't have a shoulder holster under your coat, but you could have a weapon as long as it was concealed. And Newton became an expert on all aspects of gun law. He knew there was a law, for example, against carrying a loaded rifle in a moving vehicle. So always unload your rifle in a moving vehicle. If you're on parole, which one key member is going to be. You could possess a rifle, but you couldn't have a handgun. So anyway, Newton and Seal, that what they were going to do to address the problem of police violence is start patrolling the police, as they called it, police observation. So they got some guns. We'll talk about that here in a second because they didn't have much money. And they started driving around armed and observing the police. Some other people had tried this. Some guys in Los Angeles were driving around following the police, taking notes in the Watts neighborhood in Los Angeles. But what was new was Newton decided we're going to carry loaded weapons. And we're not going to start any trouble, but we're also not going to back down. And we know our rights. They can't take our guns unless they arrest us. So anyway, these patrols began to win the Panthers strong support in the African American community. That's how they started out. So some of their influences, the Black Panthers are really a deeply political and intellectual movement. Their influence, as I mentioned, by Malcolm X. Seal and Newton wanted the party to embody Malcolm X's doctrine of armed self-defense. They also believe, like Karl Marx, I mean, these guys are way left. You might think some politicians or whatever are famously left today. These guys are way left of that. They believe, like Karl Marx, that the oppressed peoples of the world are going to rise up and overthrow the capitalist system. Although they say, while we got capitalism, they got to work within that framework. Anyway, they're also inspired by the Chinese revolutionary, Chairman Mao, who led the communist revolution in China. Matter of fact, that relates to kind of how they got their guns. This is a famous book, a book of quotes, as you see, from Chairman Mao. It's called Chairman Mao's Little Red Book. Read throughout millions of copies throughout communist China. It became quite popular with radicals in the 1960s in the United States, especially in the San Francisco Bay Area, especially on the Berkeley campus. To raise money, the Panthers, and this was the young guy Bobby Hutton's idea, they bought in bulk these books in Chinatown in San Francisco for 30 cents a copy. And then carried them across the Bay Bridge through Oakland to Berkeley and sold them to radical students for $1 a copy. And that's how they raised money to purchase a couple of their weapons. Now, anyway, but from Chairman Mao, what they took, though, in terms of ideas, is they took the idea of the Black Panther Party being what would be called a vanguard group, a leader in the coming revolution. They had the idea that they were educating the masses and preparing them for the revolution. And intellectually, the final kind of intellectual source, probably most important, is a guy by the name of Frantz Fanon, an African from Algeria who fought against French colonialism. And his famous book, The Wretched of the Earth, was required reading for all Panthers. Anybody who joined the party had to read the book. Basically, Fanon argues about colonized people and throwing off the oppressor. And what the Panthers argued is that African Americans in the United States are like a colonized people. And a view that has really become more accepted and popular 50 years later now. They're one of the first kind of saying that. So that's where they're coming. Seal and Newton sit down very early on at Seal's mother's kitchen table, and until a few years, I believe his mother has passed away. Bobby Seale is still alive in his 80s. But until a few years ago, his mother still lived in the same house, and the table was still the same. Newton and Seal sat down and wrote the Panthers' 10-point plan. You can check it out. There's just 2 copies. One I think you can read better. One you can see there, publishing from their newspaper there. But basically, the Panthers' 10-point program called for African Americans to control their own communities, for decent housing, for better education and health care, an end to police oppression and war. One very controversial thing Number 9 down here, they call for basically the release of all African American prison inmates. Their argument is that you constitutionally have a right to a jury of your peers, and that most of these African Americans in jail did not get that. They had an all-white jury, so therefore they should be released. They also call for the end of economic exploitation.
Real quick, Chris.
Yes.
Number 8 also was aligned with their idea that basically African American people and all people of color in the United States were colonized people, and therefore
Yes.
anyone in prison was a political prisoner.
Yeah, and I'm going to hit on that
Nice.
here in a little bit too. They saw themselves very much as allies with the Vietnamese people against the U.S. war. I mean, just two different arms of U.S. domination.
Yeah, probably
Also note,
famous protest signs was "No Vietnamese ever called me an N-word."
yeah, Muhammad Ali said that too,
Mm-hmm.
and he almost went to jail for it. Number 5 was very personal for Newton because, like I said, his education experience was not good in the Oakland schools. He was obviously a very smart person, obviously very intellectually curious, but what was passing for education didn't speak to him at that young age. So that was one that was very important to him. So the program kind of modifies a little bit. They actually lengthen the 10th one later on. You can already see on the left it's a little longer. But anyway, that's basically where they're coming. The Panthers, what they want to do basically is organize the mass of African Americans in a struggle for social justice. They want to galvanize the urban black ghettos, much like the civil rights movement galvanized Southern blacks. And we can see this kind of sentiment in their slogans, power to the people. And then they said that they were there, not for those people on, in the ivory tower on the gate. They were there for the brothers off the block. And so we'll talk more about a lot of their social programs are some of the most significant things that they did. So the third key early member of the Panthers that I want to talk about is a guy who comes from a different root, not from Oakland, and his name is Leroy, or he just went by his middle name, Eldridge Cleaver. Again, born in Arkansas, born in the South in 1935. His family moved west in 2 steps, first to Phoenix, and then eventually to Los Angeles. So he grew up and spent much of his youth in Los Angeles. He was in trouble. He was involved in pay crime, arrested several times for marijuana dealing. He went to prison twice, but the second time he went to prison for rape. He later admitted that he was completely guilty of it. And so again, I'm not saying these people are necessarily in all ways honorable people. They're pretty rough in some ways. And Cleaver, like I said, when he did at least admit it. Anyway, in prison, he became the Nation of Islam's ministry. He was in Soledad in California. He was in all the big, bad California prisons, San Quentin. But he became a follower of Malcolm X, and he began to read more, read widely, and he began to write. And Eldridge Cleaver was a very talented writer. So talented that he literally, you could say, wrote his way out of prison. His prison writings got to the kind of intellectual left-wing leaders in the San Francisco and Oakland Bay Area, and they were so impressed with his writings that they worked to get him paroled from prison. He had, I forget the exact length, he had a very long prison sentence. They got him paroled, not only got him paroled, but also got him a job at a magazine called Ramparts Magazine. Ramparts isn't around anymore. It was a Catholic magazine that became extremely popular with the New Left in the kind of mid-1960s to the mid-1970s. Here's a color. It's very controversial. The picture on the left is probably the most controversial issue of Ramparts. That is four of their editors burning their Vietnam draft cards in 1967, which was before a majority of Americans had turned against the war. And then on the right is, you see a story written by Eldridge Cleaver about Huey Newton in jail. And we'll talk about Huey Newton being in jail here in just a second. Anyway, eventually Cleaver's prison writings are published in a famous book. The book is called Soul on Ice. It's raw, it's powerful. If you really want to, you know, as a historian, if you want to look at a primary document of what was the feeling, the anger in the inner city during these riots, you know, that's a good book. It's pretty rough. Though. But anyway, Cleaver got out of prison and became a writer. And he had it pretty good. Had a good job, had a lot of fancy friends in California, and he kind of could have just settled in. As long as he kept his nose clean, his parole would be okay. But like Newton and Seal, Cleaver kind of felt stifled in a world of debate and ideas when he felt like he needed to take action. He wanted, matter of fact, he formed a group of his own, and he named it, just like Malcolm X, the Organization for African Unity. He wanted to capture that spirit of Malcolm X, but he didn't really know how to do it until one day when he was sitting in his office at Ramparts magazine. Oh, sorry. Let me go back to the name here. I didn't put the name on the slide. I'm sorry. Betty Shabazz was in San Francisco in early 1967. Betty Shabazz was the widow of Malcolm X. She was in San Francisco for an event, and she was going to be interviewed by Cleaver at the Ramparts offices. Shabazz, they were a little worried about her safety because of conflicts between Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam. And so they wanted security, and they hired the Black Panthers. They didn't know much about them, but the Black Panthers went to the San Francisco airport, picked up Betty Shabazz. They had a confrontation with the police outside the airport, but then left, and then they drove to the Ramparts offices. Eldridge Cleaver was sitting in his office when he saw them pull up. As several Panthers pulled up with Betty Shabazz, they were her security. As they got out of the cars and walked towards the office, they were confronted by a group of San Francisco police. And things were tense. Huey Newton, who had a shotgun in his hand, racked a shell into the shotgun, stepped in front of the Panthers while everybody else took Betty Shabazz in, and basically told the police that they could kill him, but he would kill some of them too. And the police backed off. They left. Newton explained he was within his rights. They were totally defending themselves. And Eldridge Cleaver was sitting in his office and thought it was the most profound thing he ever saw in his life. He thought, who are these? He used a little more colorful language, but he wanted to join. And so he joined the Panthers and became their Minister of Education. He's very critical because he is a great writer. He is also very critical because he is connected to the larger student anti-war protest movement. He has connections with the larger white protesters, and we'll talk more about that. One of the Panthers, David Hilliard, said, "I thought Eldridge was the reincarnation of Malcolm X. I've never heard such power, such eloquence." His wife, Kathleen Cleaver, also plays an important role and becomes a leader in the Panthers. That's her he's pictured with there. But at this point, outside of Oakland, not really many people know about the Black Panthers. But then they stage a masterpiece of political theater. So in May of 1967, they're going to march on the state capitol in uniform, fully armed. Needless to say, many Americans are shocked by the Panthers' tactics. Armed black men wearing their uniform. Their uniform was a black leather jacket, a dark blue shirt, preferably turtleneck, and a black beret cocked to the right. Anyway, groups of armed black men marching around in uniform draws quite a lot of attention, and a lot of conservatives in Oakland are not happy, including the representative in the state legislature whose name is Mulford. So Representative Mulford proposes a law that will outlaw the carrying of unconcealed weapons in public. And the California legislature starts to debate it. Matter of fact, if the law was passed, basically it would outlaw the Panthers' patrols of the police. So Newton sees this. Newton says it's to be expected that if we're going to oppose the system, they're going to change the law to try to stop us. And it is ironic, looking at today's debates of gun control and big supporters of the Second Amendment. When were people for gun control? When African Americans started carrying them. Anyway, so Newton says it's to be expected. We're going to march on the Capitol protest. What was that? No. So May 2nd, 1967, Newton, Seal, and 29 other Panthers march on the California state capitol. They pull up in their cars, get out, and march to the Capitol with shotguns, pistols, and rifles. They try to walk right in on the legislature, but the state police stop them, push them out into the hall. Now, almost as soon as they arrived, the press that was there just covering the Capitol started filming. Newton made sure that they carefully obeyed the law when they did this. Members were to keep their guns pointed up or down, never at anybody, which could be seen as threatening behavior and which could get you arrested. Cleaver was on parole, so he went unarmed. And actually, Cleaver, they contended, was not actually a Panther. He was there as a reporter, a journalist, covering the events for Rampart. So they get out of the cars, the press starts filming, they try to push their way into the assembly. They're rebuffed by the police, but just outside the assembly, Seal gets to read a statement. And they call this Black Panther Executive Mandate 1. Basically, Seal condemned with the press, onlookers, this is broadcast all around the country, condemns the Mulford Act, condemns police violence, and efforts to prevent African Americans from defending themselves. So, like I said, this is just a masterpiece of political theater. Nobody had really heard of the Panthers, and all of a sudden, they got a lot of publicity and became very popular. Their popularity grew exponentially amongst African Americans and also other protest groups. So, here they are in the Capitol. There's little Bobby Hutton, as they always called him, and still do. There's a little Bobby Hutton Park in Berkeley, California, still to this day, with a shotgun. Notice the guns are pointed down. So the next kind of big step that makes the Panthers even more popular beyond that is the Free Huey campaign. In October 1967, Newton, like I said, Newton gets involved in a lot of gunfights in his career. He is out with a friend. He borrows his girlfriend's car, which the police have noted is a Panthers car, and he drives past an officer parked on the side of the road, an officer, John Fry. Fry checks the license plate, sees it's on the Panther list, pulled him over. It's not really clear what happens next. Both sides say the other side started. But basically, Newton and two Oakland cops get in a gun battle. Fry ends up dead. The other cop and Newton end up wounded. Newton is arrested and charged with first-degree murder. And so Newton will be in jail for the next 3 years. Cleaver, though, the Panthers argue that the police started it, that Newton is a prisoner of war, if you will, a political prisoner at least, and should be freed. And so they organized the Free Huey campaign. And this is where the Panthers really begin to connect to the anti-war movement. Young African Americans in cities around the country, as well as anti-war mainstream whites, flood into the Free Huey campaign and turn the Panthers really into a national movement. One thing that's interesting about the Panthers, many parts of the Black Power movement, of Black nationalism, are, like I was saying with the Nation of Islam, separatists. They want to separate from whites. But the Black Panthers are inclusive. They realize that to succeed, that African Americans are a minority in the country, and that they will need allies beyond the black community. So the Panthers from the beginning, as one historian has said, embraced both an uncompromising commitment to black liberation, but also a principled rejection of separatist black politics. And as me and Professor Kennedy were mentioning, the Panthers really embraced an anti-imperialist ideology that emphasized the common struggles of the anti-war protesters, black Americans, and the Vietnamese fighting against the U.S. in the war. Anyway, Huey Newton became a celebrity. There's lots of jailhouse interview footage on YouTube. I wish I had time to show you some tonight, but check that out for more on Huey Newton in this time. Really, the earliest film, good film at least, we have of Huey Newton comes from this period when he was in jail. Newton was eventually convicted, not of murder, but of voluntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to between 2 and 15 years in prison that next September, 68. His conviction, though, was eventually overturned on appeal, and he got out of jail in 1970. But anyway, the Free Huey campaign became a huge national movement, and the Panthers went into a period of rapid expansion and growth. By 1968, the Panthers had chapters in many major American cities. Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, San Diego, Denver, Newark, Baltimore, all had Panther branches of the main group in Oakland. Matter of fact, their membership nationwide by 1968 was 5,000. Their newspaper, you see the masthead of their newspaper here on the slide, was printing almost 250,000 copies an issue. So they were extremely popular all around the country. Now, the Panthers were political radicals. They engaged in violent rhetoric. They're very controversial. But equally as important to them was their commitment to community organizations and programs. And the Panthers did a lot in the community. And the further along they went, the more they emphasized these. Newton eventually decided that these, what he called survival programs, were the most important. The Panthers set up free breakfast programs. They set up free sickle cell anemia testing. They set up medical clinics. They set up daycares and schools. The Panthers did a lot. Here's the free breakfast program. Now, interestingly, the free breakfast in the public schools, of course, is a huge deal now, and the Panthers played a key role in it. Now, they did not start it. The Great Society of Lyndon Johnson first proposed the idea, and there were some programs implemented, but it was very small scale and not well known. It wasn't until the Panthers started feeding school children breakfast for free that the federal government got into doing it on a large scale in the late 60s. So the Panthers are usually given some credit for starting or at least contributing to what is now a major program in American schools: free lunches, free school breakfast. So anyway, that was a big emphasis. Newton believed that the most important thing for the Panthers was to serve the people. The Panthers also inspired other groups to form like them. Mexican Americans, first in Southern California, but there were chapters here in the Valley. formed the Brown Berets. In Chicago, white radical students formed the White Patriot Party. In New York, Puerto Ricans formed the Young Lords, there on the left. Chinese in San Francisco youth formed the Red Guard. Even senior citizens got in on the action. The Gray Panthers were formed to fight for senior rights. They weren't quite as militant as the other group. Anyway, the Panthers had lots of emulators. And by 1968, they were probably the most important Black Power organization. But then things came apart very quickly. Maybe the most, one of the most important days in 1960. And I'm sorry, my pictures somehow got larger here on Collaborate, but it's April 4th, 1968. Martin Luther King was assassinated, and riots erupted all over the United States. More than 100 American cities experienced riots in what was the worst night of rioting in American history, all over the place. Really want to see some powerful video. Search for Robert Kennedy and the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Robert Kennedy, who would be killed exactly 2 months later by an assassin's bullet, was campaigning in Indianapolis in the Black community. Before he went to talk, they told him that King had just been killed. Maybe we should cancel the speech. Kennedy said, no, I have to give it. And then he stands up before an almost all Black crowd and breaks the news to them. Anyway, it was mayhem. The worst night of rioting in American history was that April 4th, April 5th. But Oakland did not have a riot. The Panthers got out in the streets. They said, you know, what happens in a riot? Who gets hurt? Whose neighborhood gets burned? Don't do it. But that does not mean that the Panthers were not radicalized by the death of King. Cleaver wrote an incendiary column in Ramparts. I wish I had a copy to share here, but it just angry, looking for lashing out because the icon of civil rights, the guy who preached nonviolence, had died violently. So anyway, April 6th, the night of April 6th, 9 Panthers are out. They later claimed that they were trying to raise money for a picnic. 3 carloads pulled over to the side of the road. They were soon approached by the Oakland police. Once again, both sides would later say the other side started it. But a gunfight emerged between the Oakland police and 9 Panthers. As gunfire erupted, Cleaver and Bobby Hutton barricaded themselves in the basement of a nearby house. The police sealed off the block. Had a standoff with Cleaver and Hutton for an hour and a half, but finally police bullets, tear gas, and fire bombs forced Cleaver and Hutton out. Now Cleaver, remember, had been in prison. He was familiar with being arrested. Cleaver was shot in the hand and shot in the butt by stray bullets. Both of them were choking from tear gas. Cleaver stripped completely naked and exited the basement of the house and surrendered. He told Hutton to take his clothes off. Hutton didn't. Hutton came out behind Cleaver, fully clothed, but with his hands in the air, and was shot and killed by the police. The police said they thought Hutton had a gun. Cleaver always swore, that it was clear, very clear, that Hutton was unarmed. Anyway, little Bobby Hutton became the first fatality of the Black Panther story. But he also became a hero. Over 2,000 people attended Bobby Hutton's funeral in Berkeley the next week, including this very famous actor. Any guesses? You guys probably a little too young here, but major actor. Yeah, thank you. Great. Marlon Brando. The Godfather. Anyway, he was a big supporter of the Black Panthers. Like I said, they're the Black Panther group that really crossed over. Yeah, good guess. And some great movies. Brando, great actor. Anyway, that's another story we could go further into. 2,000 people went to his funeral, and in the tense, packed revolutionary summer of 1968, little Bobby Hutton became a hero and a martyr to the anti-war, black power, and counterculture protesters. 1968 was the most violent year in American history since Reconstruction. Not only was King assassinated, Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, and there was just outright fighting in the streets between protesters and the Chicago police in the summer of 1968 at the Democratic National Convention. Anyway, Eldridge Cleaver, remember, was on parole. So he was charged with attempted murder out of this gunfight, and his parole was revoked. He went back to jail briefly, but then was released on bail. He actually ran for president on the Peace and Freedom Party ticket in 1968, even though he was too young to be president. And one time they asked him, what are you going to do if you win the White House, Eldridge? He said, I'm going to burn the mother effer down. Anyway, so these guys got kind of silly. In some ways, in the 60s, these people were so popular, they almost felt like they were movie stars, I think, sometimes. But anyway, Cleaver eventually fled the country. In late 1968, he was out on bail, but he was facing a hearing, and they were going to put him back in prison. So Cleaver fled the country, flew to Canada. Obviously, Border Patrol wasn't what it is today back then. Got on a plane when he was one of the most wanted people in the country, flew to Canada, then went to Cuba, eventually traveled to communist China, and spent much of the 60s as a kind of revolutionary celebrity in early 70s in Algeria, in Africa. So, but that starts to split the Panthers up. That's kind of the turning point. I don't want to keep y'all too long, but just a couple more things to wrap up here. Basically, the government went after the Panthers too. This is J. Edgar Hoover, longtime FBI director, the nation's top cop for 50 years almost. He called the Panthers the greatest threat to the internal security of the country. And so the FBI came up with something called COINTELPRO, which was not just targeting the Panthers, but targeted all 60s radicals and infiltrated them, basically sent in infiltrators, caused tensions within the group, and really torpedoed the Panthers in a lot of ways. They fabricated letters. These are known as the Brown letters. These were letters actually written by FBI agents, but claiming to be from other Panthers. So Cleaver was in Algeria, so they would send him letters supposedly from Newton, but not really written by Newton, or vice versa. They also went after, tried to portray the Panthers as violent, and went to the business people who supported the free breakfast program and got a lot of them to cancel their financial support. So started hurting them. There was also a lot of violence, and the Panthers played a role in their own downfall. Great movie that's out. Has anybody seen Judas and the Black Messiah? I have not yet. I wanted to watch it this week. I saw it was $20 on streaming. I decided I'll wait a few weeks. But anyway, it is about this man, Fred Hampton. Fred Hampton was the young 21-year-old leader of the Black Panthers Chicago chapter. And he was killed in 1969 in a raid of his apartment. That's what the movie Judas and the Black Messiah is about. An informant with the Chicago Police Department infiltrated the Panthers, betrayed Hampton. Another dirty trick against the Panthers resulted in a gun battle on the campus of the UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, that resulted in the death of two leading Los Angeles Panthers, Bunchy Carter and John Huggins. The Panthers were in a conflict with the U.S. organization. U.S. organization was another black power group. They are most famous because they invented Kwanzaa, the kind of African-American Christmas holiday. But anyway, they were another group. There was jealousy between them and the Panthers. The FBI played a role in promoting that jealousy and getting them to attack Bunchy Carter, and John Huggins were both killed on the campus of UCLA. So violence and violence against them really doomed the Panthers. By 1970, 34 Panthers had been died as a result of confrontations with the police or with other groups. And at that same time, by 1970, 15 law enforcement officers had been killed by members of the Black Panthers. So the group started to come apart. Newton and Cleaver split in the early 70s. Cleaver from Africa wanted to focus on revolution. Newton wanted to focus on the community. So last thing here, the group really started coming apart by the mid-70s. Newton, again, was accused of murder in 1974. It was actually a female secretary involved money. He may have been guilty, but he fled to Cuba. He was eventually acquitted and returned in 1977. But Huey Newton, one of the great 60s radicals, one of the great political thinkers of African American history, remained a celebrity, but became a cocaine addict. And Newton descended into kind of a downward spiral of drugs and violence in his later life. He was very famous. He was very much loved in Oakland. And he almost became a little bit of, I would say, a gangster. Like he would force young crack dealers to give him money or drugs. And then he finally, in 1989, met a 24-year-old crack dealer who didn't know or care who Huey Newton was. And at 5 a.m. on an August night, he was gunned down, killed. Cleaver eventually returned to the United States in the 1970s. And of course, I'm kind of going fast here, but there was a ton more history of the Panthers. But just to wrap up these guys, Cleaver came back to the U.S. in the 1970s, eventually was able to plea bargain his case, and I think he got 1,200 hours community service. But Cleaver actually rejected his revolutionary rhetoric, became a Republican and an evangelical Christian, and then later in his life converted to Mormonism. So Cleaver had some interesting comments. He was a radical celebrity. He went to communist China, and the group of young people he went with included some Japanese radicals, and he saw that the Chinese were absolutely as racist to the Japanese as American whites were to blacks. Cleaver also commented later about his time in Algeria. He said it gave him a new respect for police in Oakland. He said, as bad as Oakland was, police might beat you up, throw you in jail, fake the charges, but at least in 48 hours, they had to bring you to a judge and charge you with something. He said in Algeria, they take you out to the jungle and you never get seen again. So anyway, for one reason or another, Cleaver became a conservative. He even ran for the Republican Senate nomination in California in the mid-'80s. But no Republicans were going to vote for Eldridge Cleaver. He didn't win the nomination. Cleaver also died. He died in 1998. Heart disease, diabetes, and prostate cancer. He also struggled with drug addiction. But the legacy of the Panthers, just a couple of more things here. First of all, we did see, because of the Panthers, some urban police reform. Of course, this is all in the headlines today, and there's probably still a long ways to go. But one thing the Panthers really preached was that the police should look like the community. And this is not true across all of the United States, but at least there has been more of an effort to diversify police forces. Of course, obviously, a long ways to go. And in certain areas, like if you know much about the Ferguson riots several years ago, Ferguson is a suburb of St. Louis. It has a largely African-American population, but almost the entire police force and city government are whites who live in the further out suburbs. And that caused a lot of problems. But some forces are better in that regard. The Panthers also had some female leaders early. The Black Power movement generally was very misogynist, anti-women. My students, I hope, know that part of the reason the women's movement emerged was because of how women were treated in the civil rights movement and the Black Power movements. And certainly the Panthers, Cleaver especially, could be quite the misogynist. But women did play a key role in the Panthers, especially in the community programs, but even at leadership levels at a time when women just didn't have those opportunities. As I mentioned, Kathleen Cleaver, who was married to Eldridge, that's her on the bottom right. She was from the South, member of SNCC, who thought SNCC wasn't doing enough, moved to the West Coast to join the Panthers, married Eldridge Cleaver. She was an important leader during the time he was in the party. She is an emeritus law professor at Emory University today, one of the leading private universities in the South. It's in Atlanta. She is in her late 70s or early 80s. Bobby Seale is still alive today. I believe he was 84 last year. And then this is Elaine Brown. I haven't talked about her, but another prominent Panther leader. She served as the party's Minister of Information after Eldridge Cleaver left, and then was actually the chairperson of the Black Panthers from 1974 until they officially disbanded in 1977. Some people, yeah, there's the new Black Panthers, a lot of Black Panthers, but as all these old Black Panthers will tell you, the old group came to an end in 1977, and they have no connection today with any of the various incarnations of the Black Panthers. But finally, the Black Panthers and really the whole Black Power movement really built African American pride nationally. The idea of black is beautiful I'm black and I'm proud, James Brown in music, all has its roots to this period. Well, a long time in the African American community, but became more widespread in this period, and the Panthers played an important role. So anyway, I've just tried to touch on some of the highlights here of the Panthers. There's a lot you can still, if you're interested, go out there and look at and study. But that's about it for me, Professor Kennedy.
Yeah, any students have any questions or need for some clarification? Yeah, Ricardo, just chime on in either in the chat box or turn on your mic.
Yes, I had a question. Before Martin Luther King's death or his assassination, what were his thoughts on the Black Panthers, on the Black Panther Party? What did he think of that?
I don't know about the Black Panthers specifically, but he was conflicted about the way the civil rights movement was going and as it was morphing into the Black Power movement. Now, on the one hand, Martin Luther King had kind of expanded his agenda. Professor Kennedy actually did a talk on earlier this semester about when he turned against the Vietnam War. So Martin Luther King, after the victories of the civil rights movement, had kind of said, yeah, that was great, but what we're really talking about is jobs and economics here and what's going on with the war in Vietnam. So he had moved himself, but he was conflicted. The best I can say is that he did, for a time, work closely with Stokely Carmichael, and he held himself differently than Carmichael and the younger radicals, but at the same time, he also recognized that there was a frustration growing and that needed to be addressed. So that's what I would say. Professor Kennedy, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, what I just shared in the chat box is from the speech that we went over a couple months back on his speech that came out against the war in Vietnam. And so you see right there my third reason, and he goes on from there. At the beginning of the speech, he lays out about 6 reasons why he's coming out against the war in Vietnam. He's coming out around 1967 when it was still a little bit dicey to come out against the war. And so he wanted to make a really specific case of why Americans needed to come out against the war. One of the things that the frustration that he saw with what he, as we could read through this real quick, my third reason grows out of my experience in the ghettos of the North over the last 3 years, especially the last 3 summers, as I have walked among the desperate, rejected, angry young men. I have told them that Molotov cocktails and rifles would not solve their problems. I have tried to offer them my deepest compassion in maintaining my conviction that social change comes more meaningful from nonviolent action, right? And then they go on, basically, he says that, well, they say that, well, violence does work. Look at what our own government is doing to Vietnam. they wouldn't be doing that to Vietnam if they didn't think violence didn't work. So we're going to use violence as well. And what, why, and he's basically talking about the northern urban Black Power movements initiated by Stokely Carmichael, and then basically brought about by the Black Panthers as well. What they were really addressing is what you addressed earlier, Professor Davis, is that it's all great that the Civil Rights Movement brought about the Civil Rights Act of 1964. President Johnson, this kind of good old boy Southern Bubba, is becoming the president that signs this into law. It looks like there's this great change, but civil rights is actually a great start, but without economic reforms to back up that civil rights, it doesn't make much sense. It really isn't going to help anybody just because you can vote. If you're not given good options of people who are providing actual policies to help dejected people who are suffering in poverty, what good is it to have the right to vote? And this is an age-old problem in the United States of America, going back most prominently to Reconstruction with the failure of the 40 acres and a mule, right? Freeing 3 million people through the 13th Amendment is great, but not providing them with any kind of economic security for them and their families really isn't going to give that freedom any credence. And so this frustration that we see being expressed 100 years later from Reconstruction in the late 1960s of African Americans and other people of color who have been suffering from basically white supremacy going back to the colonial era are expressing their frustration now with outright violence, or at least perceived violence with self-defense. And this is something that greatly concerned Dr. King, because he worried, and rightly so, and predictably so, that the backlash against such pronouncements of self-defense and theater of self-defense would only lead to basically just slamming down on these movements. And with the FBI and the Nixon administration, they understood from their perception and experience that the Black Panther movement and other organizations that were inspired by the Black Panther movement was a political revolution afoot, and they were dealt accordingly. So a lot of these members, like Fred Hampton, were sought out by the FBI and outright assassinated with the idea that these were revolutionaries that sought to overthrow the federal government. Whether that was a correct perception or not is definitely up for debate. But again, that was their perception of seeing, basically young black men picking up guns with their sunglasses and their berets and leather jackets, scaring the hell out of white middle America.
Well, yeah, and King recognized that they were between a rock and a hard place, because that's how he succeeded, was nonviolent, claiming the moral high ground. And the results kind of speak for themselves. Although Huey Newton would contend that they would only defend themselves. Like, ideally, in a just society, they would not be violent, but only if they were the targets of violence themselves.
Yeah. And what Dr. King was probably most worried about was just the perception of violence, right? In a white supremacist society, the structure of the government, the political institutions are white supremacist. Any hint or theater of violence, the nuance of, they're just trying to defend themselves, is going to be brushed aside.
Right.
And the backlash is going to come.
And we see it today too.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Thank you, Ricardo.
Yes.
Any other questions or points for clarification? One of the things I wanted to point out too, with the, when you pointed out how the Black Panthers stormed the state capitol, and with the Mulford Act, curtailing gun rights in California, the irony of it is that in the mid-'70s, this led to the politicization of the NRA, right? The NRA used to be in the 60s prior to that was basically kind of a hunting association, right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
It taught, basically, it would have, basic, gun safety classes and advocated for that. But ironically, kind of white folks in the Midwest saw the Mumford Act as a serious slippery slope to that would one day come for, people living in rural areas throughout places like the Midwest and the Dakotas or Wyoming or what like that. And it brought kind of a radicalization of the NRA. And in the I think in 1976, this faction of the NRA completely took it over and really just made it a lobbying organization to make sure that gun rights were, where the Second Amendment was going to kind of be transformed from this kind of social contract understanding, where if they're in times of distress, you as a citizen might be needed to be part of a militia, which was probably the original intent of the Second Amendment, to bring it to an individual's rights to own, operate, and to do whatever they wanted with whatever weapon they had available to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very interesting the way it cut. I look at the law as Huey Newton found it. It's kind of just a relic of kind of California's Old West days, and nobody really thought of it till he did.
Yeah,
But then people said, "Well, wait a second, we need to rethink this."
Yeah, when you see, 19-year-old black men with guns, it definitely.
But unintended consequences. We never know what's going to lead to what, as far as they inspired the NRA.
Yeah. Any other questions? We could wrap it up, but yeah, great presentation, Professor Davis.
Well, thank you.
Any student out there, I really do encourage you to really look into this, even if it's just kind of looking up YouTube videos of some of the Black Panther videos. You can really get a sense, if you kind of think in the context of a white supremacist political structure, when you look at Fred Hampton videos or Huey Newton videos, of why the Black Panthers would have been perceived as such a threat, which would have been a misperceived threat. I mean, if we lived in a more sane, rational world, if the political leaders of the time in Washington had just worked with the Black Panthers, a lot of issues could have been addressed that they were concerned about. But
well, it was 55 years ago, but the issues still continue today.
Absolutely. It's with the Derek Chauvin case, it's definitely the issues that they were bringing up in the late 60s are still plaguing us. When a white cop can put his knee on a black man's neck and just let him die in front of God and everybody. Thank goodness it was at least videotaped, so that man could have been held accountable for murdering him.
Yeah. Huey Newton was on that issue 55 years ago. So
yeah.
Well, thanks to everybody for joining us and listening to me talk about a topic that I enjoy very much.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you, Professor Davis. I'll make this video available probably sometime tomorrow when the video is available to me.
Okay.
All right.
Great. Thanks for inviting me. Good night, everybody.